2 years ago, I was walking in Chicago on St. Patrick's Day, not to see the famous parade or the glowing green river, but to see a play that evening. The air was brisk and the ground was damp beneath my suede shoes. Coming into a dark, narrow alley, I found myself startled by the croaky sound of a man's voice. "Watch out, there's a dead body up there." He gestured in the direction we were heading. My heart sank as I continued down the street with hesitance, yet still the slightest sense of urgency, and flashing blue and red lights came into view around me. Remembering, there I was, in the middle of the vibrant city on one of the liveliest days of the entire year, witnessing the aftermath of a suicide. Remembering this moment, I was scared stiff. Not by the sounds of the sirens in the distance as my mom tried to shield my view from the scene, but I was scared because I knew what the man felt. I knew where his thoughts were the moment his feet came free of the balcony beneath him, and the familiarity terrified me. And although this is not a typical thing for someone to admit in front of an audience, and society has deemed me ashamed of these monstrous thoughts, keeping silent is far more painful. This was hard for me to see back on that chilling March evening. I went home to many sleepless nights, wishing I had the courage to speak up about how I was feeling. I no longer wanted to be in a place where self-harm was the only way to feel relief, or pacing my room in the hours of the night when everyone else was asleep. I just wanted to feel normal again. Except the problem was, I couldn't even remember how that felt. Years had gone by, tiring me out with obsessive, intrusive, negative thoughts that, up until that point, I was able to brush off. But this night made me recognize that I needed to get help before it was too late. So fast forward to the fall, and I was finally able to speak up for what I needed. I was at a point of emptiness being all I ever felt. But one simple text to my mom saying that I felt a therapist would benefit me was all it took to get me started on my crazy journey of healing. I started seeing a therapist, and soon after, a psychiatrist. Over the next few months following this, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder. With so much going on, it was impossible to find balance, especially after dealing with everything alone for years prior to this. Looking back, signs of these issues became recognizable from my early childhood, and it became clear that I had far more to work on than I knew going in. As time went on without me making much progress from therapy and medication, my family and I agreed it would be a good idea for me to take some time off school and go to a partial hospitalization program. So, for the next month, I took a break from my rigorous school courses and went to therapy for 6 hours a day. At the program, I focused solely on my mental health, learning coping skills, processing with other kids facing similar issues. But after the program, I was still missing something. Even though I was ready to talk to my parents a little more and finally get the help that I'd needed for such a long time, it was still uncomfortable for me to admit that I wasn't the Sophie everyone thought they knew. When asked by concerned classmates where I'd been, I meekly replied that I had a concussion. I wasn't ready to talk to people about how I was feeling. But after the program, I stayed home for days from school, sulking at home. I wouldn't eat, didn't want to look at social media. I couldn't even motivate myself to take a shower. And during this time, a friend of mine saw me struggling, and seeing me acting so differently concerned her. She wanted to help, but didn't know the best way. So all she did was offer to listen. Little did she know, this was the best thing she could have done for me when I was in that dark place. Her putting herself in my position for a second, allowing me to share everything on my mind, carried me so far. And it was such a simple thing. All along, I had convinced myself that the only way to connect was to be someone else, some kind of ideal, unflawed superhuman. And to think, all of those distortions could have been avoided with just a short conversation. My friend sticking with me, being patient, compassionate, and accepting was the beginning of my contentment with my authentic self. When I was at the program, we were taught a skill called social versus authentic self. And our social self is who we show the world, while our authentic self is who we show to those very close to us, or in some cases, nobody. In my case, my authentic self had only ever been seen by me. But when my friend was there for me, I was able to show her my authentic self, and this showed me that I didn't need to be afraid to let others see it. After I had this conversation with my friend, she helped me break things down, and taking things moment by moment, I returned to school. Her sticking with me, being patient, compassionate, and accepting was the beginning of my contentment with my authentic self. During this time, I learned to be grateful for those who are there to listen. Up until that point, I never gave enough credit to the people who were right there with me the entire time. I just pushed them away. So right now, I'd like everyone to think of a past act of someone else's empathy that they're grateful for, even if it was just one situation, someone who has been there for you when you needed it. Next, think of someone you could go to. Any person you'd feel comfortable leaning on, one time or many if you needed. A trustworthy relationship to build on. And finally, think of someone new to reach out to. Whether it just be asking how their day went or giving a kind smile, think of someone you can connect with. None of my medications or therapy skills can begin to do for me what compassion has. Now I know that even though these mental illnesses will never fully disappear, I can continue to be open. I can coexist with them if I continue to be open about my struggles. So look for more opportunities, more chances to share your story, more chances to hear someone else's. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge the man who decided to jump that day. I desperately wish that he had another chance for someone to listen, and I'm forever disappointed that I didn't get a chance to lend an ear. I'm grateful for his life. Last but not least, I owe all of you a huge shout out. Thank you for listening, opening your ears to my story. Now keep them open. Hear more stories, and someday, even share your own. Thank you.